What's going on, everybody? Three Amigos podcast here. Chris and Anthony back. We're talking video game news today because the Need for Speed franchise might be dead. It might be over. It had a good run, but it came out that EA was basically going to take Criterion Games and put them, for the most part, onto working on the Battlefield games. And they said that a small core of Criterion would continue, quote unquote, to make Need for Speed games, but we have our doubts. We have our doubts because this is EA and they have a pretty long history of buying companies and then stripping them down and shutting them down forever. So, Anthony, I thought it'd be nice to have you on because you're like the OG Need for Speed fan. I know you've kind of had your ups and downs with the franchise since then, but how do you feel about all this, man? The series that you grew up on might be over.
Maybe it's about time type of thing. In the sense of like it's lived and died. Also to the viewers and listeners, I sound like crap because I'm still sick. But it's gonna power through. Yeah, Need for Speed and I guess Burnout as an extension to that. Well, actually no, because Burnout hasn't made a game since Paradise, and they just been making Need for Speed games, so never mind. Um, yeah, I didn't like the last few Need for Speed games. Before Unbound was Heat, right?
Yes.
Which I also didn't really like that one. We'll get into that later. And then 2015 was one of them that I was like, it was okay, could have been better, could have been a lot worse, but could have been better. I don't remember if like either you and I spoke about this before, like many times, but EA used to be the GOAT if you think about it.
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
like football was good. Madden was good back then. They had Skate. They had some kick-ass James Bond games. They did I think of another franchise that they did that I can think of right now.
They did the MVP baseball games. They did
Medal of Honor
and
was good.
they did NBA Live back when NBA Live was like the go-to basketball
Yep, it
game.
was back then. Yep. Medal
They
of Honor
did
was
all of
good.
the NBA and NFL Street games,
Oh yeah.
which were great. Yeah. They did Fight Night. They did all the Fight Night
Fight Night. Oh
games.
my God. Yes, Fight Night.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not a boxing guy. I don't know nothing about boxing, and I enjoyed one of the Fight Night games. I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, EA was the GOAT back in the game. EA Games challenge everything. EA Sports is in the game. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it could, even like all the controversy that's been going on with Madden recently and the past few couple years of Madden. NBA Live no longer a thing. No more of those like cool James Bond games. No, they used to have Harry Potter games back in the day too. And some were
Yeah.
good, some weren't so good, but they still did the Harry Potter ones. And Need for Speed seemed to be like their Need for Speed and Madden and Battlefield were like their main three going forward. Um, and it seems like the only thing good they can do is games from Respawn because they're not really touching those Respawn games. And it kind of sucks that they are going through this crap because, management is stupid and don't know what the hell they're doing. Um, but yeah, I guess now it's time for them to just call it, I guess.
Well, it's disappointing because the last two Need for Speed games were honestly pretty good, just from a uh well, especially Unbound. I like the mechanics of that game a lot. Um, how the nitrous mechanics worked, and there was a lot of strategy behind the racing, and they did add a lot to that game through patches, but I think that it was so bare bones when it launched. Like they didn't even have cops in the online mode. And I'm pretty sure online was only daytime racing. Like you couldn't even do nighttime races with no cop. It was just only daytime. Yeah, it's a shame. And the game probably didn't sell well. I'm assuming that's why they decided to uh pretty much gut Criterion and turn them into Battlefield support company. Um, and it's too bad, but I think that there's a bigger reason why potentially losing Need for Speed is a problem for the the racing video game genre. And the main reason is that we don't have any other Need for Speed types of games because most car games have turned into festivals. It's a car festival in a part of the world, and that's the game. There's no story, there's no like grittiness, there's no cops. It's just a festival, or it's a full-blown racing sim, like Gran Turismo or Motorsport. That's it. That's the genre right now. We don't have Midnight Club anymore. It sounds like we're potentially losing Need for Speed. The first crew game was a little bit more in that like gritty like genre, and then the second one was a very ambitious game, and then the third one is just another car festival. And it's unfortunate, not that those games aren't good and like, they're fun. It's like a fun environment, but you can really only do so many like car festival games before you end up, sort of like Forza Horizon, which people are starting to get a little bit tired of, a little bit burnt out on. We're losing one of the few like unique types of racing games, arcade racers, that we had. And it's mostly because there's a really dumb company in charge of publishing the games. They didn't market Unbound like at all. They released a trailer, I think, 1 month before the game came out, like the first trailer ever. Um, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, you and I grew up on arcade racers.
Yeah.
We were big Midnight Club fans. You played a lot of the old Need for Speed games. Um, yeah, it's an unfortunate shift of the racing video game genre because I'm more of a I prefer the like I really liked Need for Speed Unbound story. I enjoyed it for what it was. I did have some issues about how the campaign was structured, but I enjoyed the story. I thought it was pretty fun. And I know that a lot of people like go back to old Need for Speed games and they're like, "Man, they got to do it like how they did Most Wanted and how that like those games look terrible now. They're really short. They don't have that many cars. If you look at Need for Speed Unbound, it looks better, it plays better, and it has way more cars. It's just a better game. It's probably the best Need for Speed game they ever made. And it just got a shit hand, and the Need for Speed's reputation was already kind of not great when that game came out, which is like hard to recover from. Uh this is unfortunate. We saw this happen with Vicarious Visions. They made the phenomenal Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, I think. Was that what it was? It
Yeah.
was the first two games.
Yeah.
Uh, and
And I
that was awesome.
remember when we were doing a podcast previously and I asked you like, hey, what's the plan for Pro Skater 3 and 4? And you said, no, they shut that shit down. They're no longer
Yeah, they
a
did the
thing.
same
And
thing, man. It didn't sell well, I guess, or whatever at the time, well, whatever Activision dictates as selling well.
yeah.
And so they stripped it down and they put them on like Call of Duty support or, some game that means they're never going to make any more Tony Hawk games,
Yeah.
which sucked because it sounded like there were plans to do another remake and they just got canned.
And what's crazy is I don't know if you remember in the beginning of Unbound, before you well, like spoilers for those who care, but before everything like when that person betrays you,
Yes.
there's a part where you get like the red Lamborghini, or was it a red Lamborghini? It's like a
Yeah,
red.
you get to choose, but that's the one I picked. Yeah.
And so I was in like this like a little like dirt area with like puddles, and the way that the sun was shining on the puddles and everything, and I was like, dude, this ignoring the character models, this is one of the most beautiful looking games I ever played.
It's a
And that's
beautiful game,
Yeah, and I
dude.
really didn't like the game, but I was like these visuals and the world that you get to drive around was really amazing. But the problem for me with gaming now is everyone is you have one or two categories. You either for some reason can't market well, or you can't get a game to succeed as well, and therefore you just close down, a company and make them kind of like um I'm trying to think of the word basically where you separate the employees to various teams, like a delegation type of thing,
Yeah,
like
pretty much.
and
Just
then
disbanding the whole
yeah,
company.
there you go. And the other side of it is, oh, we're gonna buy your company and you're gonna work for us primarily and just make games for us, Xbox. Um, but in terms of that, because after when Criterion officially became part of the EA team, and after they made Burnout Paradise, they did Need for Speed Hot Pursuit and Rivals. And Rivals was one of my favorite ones of all time. That game is awesome. I would play it to this day if it was,
Hmm.
active. Um, After that, the games kind of for me, the games kind of went down a bit. Some people enjoyed some of the other games like Heat and Unbound, some didn't. And it makes you wonder, how are certain people still in charge when they keep failing over and over and over again? Um, and I don't know how the that world works. I don't know the process behind who decides when someone should go, who decides what they should do with a team. But I remember I was watching a video before this podcast about the rise and fall of Criterion, and it was like 30
Hmm.
minutes long, so I didn't finish it. But they mentioned a point where before one of the Burnout games, Criterion had to make that first person shooter game Black, I think it's called.
Mm.
And um and that aspect is like, well, if you're using the team to help with Battlefield, is it to help with the game or help with just like people's bullshit complaints to the game, like I'm not saying bullshit complaints, but like just the complaints of the game that's being, crappy. Because Battlefield, if I had to choose between Battlefield and Call of Duty, Battlefield is my favorite one in terms of like a team aspect. You get your
Hmm.
squad of four, you can each play your own role, you can give each other first aid kits and ammo, and it was fucking badass. And the buildings get destroyed. And then the last Battlefield was shit, and a lot of people hated it. It was either Battlefield 1 or 5. I can't remember which one was people
Hmm.
hated. I had fun with it. I was playing with Frankie and his friends from college, and I was like, this is fun, and I want to do more of this. And now you got these games that either they're going to be supported going forward, like Battlefield may be supported going forward, or they're not going to make any more. There was a mode me and Frankie played where you do respawn, but you get a certain number of respawns per team, and so as the more you respawn, the less respawns you have left. And it was me and him against an entire team on top of a church trying to kill everyone that came up to us, and we died, but it felt like a movie. And I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like, I want to do this again. Um, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen with the other EA licenses. What's going to happen to Star Wars Battlefront? What's going to happen to I guess Madden will still keep going. FIFA is now, what is it called? They have a new name for it now, right? It's no longer FIFA.
No, it's still FIFA,
It's
pretty
still
sure.
FIFA. Wasn't it
There's
something?
there was a competitor that changed their name to like uh eFootball or eFootball Club
Yeah,
or
that's
something like that.
yeah, that one is Konami, right?
Yeah, you might be right
Yeah.
actually.
And so you got there, and I hate to bring up Angry Joe, but
Oh
he
no, you're
talks about
right.
this.
Hold on, it's called FC 24.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's like
I
football club or
totally
something like
missed it. They
that.
changed the name of their game too.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I hate to bring up Angry Joe about this video, but he basically talks about with Madden, like because people are still buying the same bullshit and spending all the money on the microtransactions, they're not gonna stop with the bullshit, and they're gonna keep putting out crap. And it sucks for Criterion because you also got to think with Criterion being whatever's gonna happen to them. I don't think everyone is gonna get a job out of this new change. You got to imagine, right? Some people might get laid off, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's confusing about this is that it feels like an odd half measure for EA because like they've killed other like so apparently right now EA Sports and EA they're like considering it separate companies almost even though it's all under the same umbrella, but like EA Sports is their own thing and they've moved Need for Speed into the EA Sports section because they count it as a sport even though it's whatever street racing, but doesn't matter. um but they've killed off sports franchises before. So I don't like Fight Night is dead. They killed all the street games. They killed the basketball game. I mean, basketball, NBA 2K sells crazy. It's like, it's weird that to me, it's weird that they wouldn't just kill Need for Speed completely. And then it's also weird that they are still trying with Battlefield because it's not Call of Duty. It's never,
Hmm.
ever going to be Call of Duty. And they really, really want it to be Call of Duty. What's weird is that Need for Speed is the only game like it in that genre. They're not doing a festival. It's not a car sim. It's its own thing. There are no other, mainstream racing games with cops that chase you and
Yeah,
like try
or
to ram you.
nitrous. Like,
It's uh it's weird to me that they wouldn't go farther in the direction
mhm.
of having their own racing game. And it's also weird that they're just gonna leave it as this like really small team. And like in the statement, they claim that they're gonna keep making Need for Speed games. It just seems hard to believe because there's like hardly anybody left to work on the games.
I got a couple
And
of
when I was just
couple
gonna say,
of
like,
for you. Yeah, uh-huh.
I was gonna say, when they released Unbound, it was already bare bones, and that was with a
Mhm.
quote unquote full team of people, even though the game was probably rushed. So now you cut the team even more. I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like you're giving those people a fair shot to make another good game because like Need for Speed Heat, a lot of Unbound was built off of Heat, and then it seemed like they were, finally headed in the right direction ish. But now not so much.
So I know you earlier you mentioned all these festival games, and um I find it funny when people say, "Oh, I love Forza Horizon 5," and I guess it is subjective, but for me, I felt that to be the most boring Horizon game out of 3, 4, and 5, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
for me, a big part of those games is the map you get to explore, and it was just boring. 4 had the seasons change every week, so that was interesting. You have a difference in the world every time a season changes. Horizon 3 was the reason why I got an Xbox originally. Um, so it's funny that with EA saying that they're separate between EA Games and EA Sports, and if Need for Speed is moving into EA Sports, is it a possibility they're stupid enough to try to make Need for Speed a racing simulator, which is not even going to compete to Forza and Gran Turismo? Um, but if they do decide to do that, that'd be kind of stupid. And it's also funny how back in the day, 2K football or NFL 2K was the better football game, and now it can't, it no longer exists because of Madden, and
Hmm.
how EA had the better basketball game, but now that doesn't exist because 2K got the better basketball game now. So that's just kind of hilarious how that trade-off kind of went. But with EA, what do they have now exactly? Because I don't think anyone or I don't think they're gonna have enough people buy the next Battlefield because of how the last one was. Unless people are stupid, then they're gonna go buy it, right? Because they got Battlefield that's really crappy. Madden is only being bought by the suckers who don't care about microtransactions. Same thing with FIFA.
Right.
Need for Speed is gonna go in one of two directions. It's gonna get more cringier and less developed and more ski mask. Or it's gonna go into a racing simulator I mean, if they do a good one, I doubt it because they can't even get Madden right, and that's a simulator, right? That's technically a football simulator, right?
Yeah.
So they can't get that done. Aside from Battlefield, football, Need for Speed, and FIFA, what else do they have? I guess the Respawn games, technically, right? Um, which
Yeah.
I guess no more Titanfalls, as far as I know. They'll probably make a third
No.
Star Wars Jedi, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. There will be another Star Wars Jedi game, I believe. But yeah, I mean, I remember Need for Speed Pro Street. That was probably as close as NFS got to a racing sim.
I forgot
Uh,
about that one.
yeah, I actually liked that game a lot.
I never played it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the funny thing about Need for Speed was like it started to become sort of obvious over the years that like they would just try new shit with every game that they'd make. Like, so for better or for worse, you were gonna get something different than the last game you played, which I think it was kind of a double-edged sword because some people would get really attached to one of the previous Need for Speed games, and then the new one would come out, and they're like, I don't really like anything about this new one. But from a new fan standpoint, like recruiting, new people into your audience, it wasn't the worst strategy in the world because if someone wasn't really interested in a previous version of NFS and then they saw the new one and they're like, "Oh, that looks different. I'm kind of into it." Then they might try it out. They might become a fan of the franchise. But I don't know. I could see it. I honestly could because they're dumb enough to keep making Battlefield games, even though they killed Medal of Honor. So, like, you think they sort of understood at one point in time that Call of Duty, it's like you're either playing Call of Duty or you're playing Fortnite. That's it. There's no, those are the two big like online shoot people games. Uh, and then there's like a bunch of other ones, I guess, in a lower tier. But you're not Battlefield's not ever going to compete with Call of Duty. But I could totally see that same company deciding like, oh, let's compete with Gran Turismo and Forza. Which, it's funny because EA probably does make some of the best looking racing games. Um, I mean, Unbound, aside from the character models, was gorgeous. That game almost
That
looked,
city looked real.
dude, it looked so photorealistic. It was crazy impressive, especially for a game that like clearly didn't get enough development time. Um, so I could see them trying it, but yeah, it's just a bummer, man. I really liked Unbound. I went back to it, I think, after the first update with the cops, but then they've released a few more updates since then. I just have not been able to get back into it. And it's tough. I think too, like racing games are in a tough spot where it's like they probably do need to become a live service model. Like I think it doesn't work to release a racing game and then just abandon it for 3 months. Like I think it does need like weekly content because they're not, it's kind of like Mortal Kombat or like any fighting game where it's like you're not really buying it for the story. Like the story in these kinds of games, fighting games and racing games, is not very long, or it's not very good. So even if it is good, it's not very long. So, and then once you're done with it, I mean, you're not really gonna play it again. Like, so then it's on to, I guess, just playing ranked and shit like that. But if your game is not getting new content, like a fighting game's a little bit different. You can unlock costumes and all that kind of stuff. But in a racing game, you're not really unlocking anything. You're just racing. And if there was, Unbound struggled because they just like abandoned it for like 3 or 4 months and then came back with an update. But by then people moved on.
Yeah.
Just the player base disappeared. Like there's plenty of videos talking about how the game totally died. This, the Steam player numbers and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, they decided to pretty much can it. I'm very curious to see what the next Need for Speed game is because uh they were never that far apart. Like I'm pretty sure Heat to Unbound was like 3 years maybe between games. So, if they really are making
Mm.
another one, it would be out sometime in the next couple of years, since Unbound came out last year. I don't know.
Well,
I
you know
guess
what's
we'll see what
funny
happens.
is Need for Speed 2015 had put if you pre-order the game, you could get the BMW for Most Wanted, right?
Hmm.
Need for Speed Heat had something with that. I seen videos of it. It was like you couldn't get it, but there was like a mission that had to do with it. And then Unbound, you can use it in online, but you couldn't use it in single player. So it's funny to me that a lot of people talk about Most Wanted being as great as it was, which it was a very interesting story. Um, and it was a pretty lengthy game for Need for Speed. But it seems like they want to do something with this, the story of Most Wanted, or at least bring back Most Wanted. But to my knowledge, Need for Speed has yet to make a remaster of any old games of theirs. Like, have you noticed that? Like, there's no Need for Speed remasters of any like old ones. No Madden remasters doesn't make sense, but like no Battlefield 1 remaster. Like, um,
Yeah, it actually makes the Burnout Paradise remaster even weirder. They like chose that series.
right.
I mean, those games were fun, but it's just like EA has a ton of. I mean, you can't really do the sports games, but they have a huge catalog of NFS, and uh, they are in charge of a lot of franchises now. And I don't know how else to phrase it other than I guess they just don't do remasters. They're
And it's
just not interested
funny,
in spending resources.
because in the older Need for Speed games like Most Wanted and I think Undercover and maybe a couple others after that, they used live action cutscenes. And in
Yeah.
back in like Most Wanted, it didn't look as good as compared to like Need for Speed 2015. But now you can do those types of cutscenes and the type of world visually as Unbound, and at least make a kick-ass visually game, and then just get the racing right and the story right. Um, and everyone, I guess everyone really wants a Most Wanted remake or sequel to it, and we're never gonna get that. Um, and it makes you wonder how big of a company is EA to the point where um are they capable of being acquired by someone? Because one company for me, and I speak freely about this whenever I can. I hate Sega. I don't think Sega is a good company, but I think Sega should close its doors and sell Sonic to Nintendo, make Sonic a Nintendo exclusive, and they'll make better Sonic games. I think if EA can be purchased by someone, and if Microsoft wants to buy EA, because they already have some of the EA games on their Game Pass, they could probably hopefully, get them to make better games. I don't know what's happening with, the future of Bethesda considering Starfield, but that was like, I guess, already in development before they were purchased. So maybe Elder Scrolls 6 would be a full-on kick-ass exclusive for Xbox, but I think at this point, EA is never going to change. They're not going to change. They're gonna keep doing stupid shit, giving you a ski mask for a pre-order for a collector's edition. I can't even
And
say
name
that out loud.
tags. And name tags and
Dude, I'm
markers.
mad that I bought a ski mask and name tags to do a video, and I never did the video.
Oh,
I
that would have
never did
been
it.
good.
I still have them too. They're in my closet. I still got them. I never got to do the video.
It's so weird too because EA, in the midst of all their like dumb anti-consumer stuff, they finance the Star Wars Jedi games, which are awesome. Which is just like, I mean, even though the last one came out and had like a bunch of bugs and glitches and took like 6 months to fix, but the fact that they fixed it at all is crazy to me. The fact that they gave Respawn the resources to continue working on the game until it was fully patched is nuts because plenty of other publishers do not bother doing that, like Redfall with Microsoft. That game has totally been abandoned. It's
Did I
probably
tell you
never
what
going to
happened with
get
Redfall?
fixed. What's that?
Did I tell you what happened with Redfall? Some guy from
No.
Xbox said, I forgot who it was, somebody from Xbox. He said Redfall is going to be a great game in 10 years.
Oh yeah, that's just like Halo
Um,
Infinite.
yeah, yeah. And did you see what happened when I think it was the first time they were going to announce the Star Wars Jedi game, Jedi Survivor? And they had the guy in charge of Respawn or whoever was over there. They had him during, it was like maybe like one of the Jeff Keighley things,
Hmm.
and they had him in the crowd sitting down and was like, I can't really talk about it, but working on a new Star Wars game. And it's like, I guess EA was like responsible for that. Like, don't give him enough time or don't give him a whole stage to say, show, hey, so and so's in the crowd and he's gonna talk about what he got coming up. Yeah, we're doing a Star Wars game. And that's it. Like, the fuck, EA, like your marketing is bullshit. Like,
Yeah, I mean the way they've
hey,
handled Star Wars in
yeah,
general has been really weird, but
like we're doing a new Star Wars. Even they did Star Wars Squadrons. I wanted to try it and I played it briefly
yeah.
by myself, and that was apparently it was a good game.
Yeah,
Um,
had a lot of good feedback, but again, it was, I guess you could say this about a lot of EA games come with the term bare bones,
yeah.
which is the concept might be strong and then they just don't, as a publisher, either do not supply enough resources or they just don't care.
And you know, it's
It's
funny, I had a thought about that where it was with the Xbox thing about how Xbox has all the money to buy everyone left and right, and people say, "Oh, they could buy Sony if they wanted to." And my thought process on it was having the money and not knowing how to use that money is two different things.
yeah,
You know, you can have a shit ton of money, but if your games are just ass, then you're not really making the point, right? Because I remember even Medal of Honor, I don't know when it died officially, but they had PSP games for Medal of Honor that had online multiplayer. And I played it briefly, and it was really fun until people hacked the game and they were throwing infinite grenades from the sky, blowing up the entire map. But when you played a match, they didn't have those cheaters and hackers. It was a fun multiplayer thing, and I think it had like 32 players total online for the
damn,
PSP. And I was like, dude, this is fucking cool.
pretty impressive.
And you look at what you could do with the PS5 and the Xbox Series with what you could do with Battlefield, and nope, Battlefield's ass. Or hey, I want to play Madden and get some really realistic football. Nope, Madden is ass. Well, how about Need for
Yeah,
Speed? Well, Need for Speed is ass. So
no.
EA, I don't know, man. Is EA stand for eat ass? Is that what it is now? Like you're just eating ass now? Like
Yeah, it's they're a very frustrating company because it seems like they have so much in terms of resources to like put out better product, but at the same time, it's like what a lot of people say, which is just like if people are buying it no matter what, this is the same thing that happens with Pokemon, which is like if people keep buying it and helping them set all these like sales records, why would they ever say, let's put more money into it? They literally don't have to. Like, and then you see what happens when one of their franchises doesn't sell well. They're like, okay, well, we'll just shut it down forever, which is just, as a fan, it's frustrating because, other companies, like I think when Ghost of Tsushima sold, like they flexed like selling 3 million copies or something, which is, I guess, impressive for a single player game, although it does have multiplayer, it's just that it wasn't that like mainstream. 3 million's not that much nowadays. Pokemon wakes up and they sell 10 million in like 3 days. Zelda sells 10 million in like its first week or whatever. Um, Need for Speed selling 3 million, EA probably looks at that and they're like, all right, well, why bother? Like, we'll just I don't know, put out more commercials for Madden or something. It
I used to think 3 million was a lot, and then you realize that's only like maybe a third of Manhattan, right?
yeah.
Maybe so, and that's just one city out of an entire world. So yeah, it's not a
Yeah,
lot.
it's not enough. And also I think sometimes people hear these sales numbers and they think full price, but like there are discounts all the time. And especially Need for Speed, that game has been on sale pretty much every single week for like the last 9 months. So they're not clearing $70 times 3 million. This is it's still a lot of money, but most of that is discounted, unfortunately, for them. But yeah, so end of an era. RIP. I'm kind of going on, just assuming that Need for Speed is dead. If they do make another game or they reverse course at some point, that'd be cool. I would love the Need for Speed to go back to a little bit darker. I thought Unbound was better, but still wasn't quite there. Um, and we don't have Midnight Club anymore. So if we also lose Need for Speed, then we are officially all out of like edgy racing games, and it's just festivals and sims. Um, and it's unfortunate because having all these options are always good, and these game franchises tend to push each other forward. And if we lose one of them, then the other ones don't have to try as hard. So it's disappointing, but yeah, end of an era.
Yeah, get your 40s ready and pour one out. That's all I can really think of it now is just get your 40s ready and pour one out.
RIP to Need for Speed. Yeah, that's gonna do it. Thanks for tuning in. Peace out.